Parental rights. It's been a rallying cry we heard grow louder during the COVID pandemic. As a parent, I have the right to not have my child wear a mask, right? Or get a vaccine. And in Idaho, those rights are also extended to parents who choose to not have their child receive any sort of medical care, even those who are injured because it goes against their religious beliefs. See the faith healers. And while those same rights are no longer extended to parents of transgender children seeking gender-affirming medical care, the topic of parental rights and medical care were both the focus of a law passed this past legislative session. Senate Bill 1329 was meant to amend Idaho's Parental Rights Act by preventing medical providers from performing medical procedures on kids without their parents' consent. It was described by its sponsor, that'd be Senator Kelly Anthon, as a simple bill.
It simply deals with the ability of parents to make decisions regarding health care and medical procedures for children. It simply says that no health care services to a minor child can be done without obtaining the consent of a parent. Just stop and think about that.
Yeah, just stop and think about that. Problem is, there apparently was a part of that that wasn't thought about, or at least thought about completely. The bill's sponsors, authors, and all the Republican lawmakers who voted for it, and all of them did since it passed right along party lines, well, they didn't want to think about what wasn't in the bill, I guess, because even though it was brought up during debate.
No one is trying to keep secrets from parents, but young adults have a right to seek the kind of assistance they need in the times of help they need. And that's all that's all I'm asking, is leave this small safety net open.
Those times of health they need, cases of mental health or even incest. That part wasn't thought about apparently because this new law also, I guess the question is, does it protect sexual predators who also happen to be family members? As Democratic Representative Alana Rebell pointed out a few weeks later in the House floor debate, if minor victims weren't already comfortable going to their parents with something like this, like incest, the Parents' Rights and Medical Decision-Making Act wasn't going to make it any easier for them to seek that help. So has this new law posed any sort of problems? Hunter Funk looked into it.
According to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, every 9 minutes, Child Protective Services found strong evidence of child sexual abuse. Among cases of child sexual abuse reported to law enforcement, 93% of perpetrators are known to the victim. 7% are strangers, 59% are acquaintances, and 34% are family members. It's why something that got overlooked might be a bigger issue. Senate Bill 1329 moved fast in the Senate.
When I originally saw the bill, there wasn't a lot of time to prepare, and that's a real problem in legislative session. We're hit with, bill after bill, and I think last session, more bills on record.
In February, it was introduced and passed the Senate 27-7 within a few days. Proponents of the bill argued that parents need to give consent to allow medical procedures and mental health services for minors.
And who's to determine who's the bad parent who doesn't get to know? That's the problem. And that's the problem this bill is meant to solve, and hopefully solve. This bill doesn't prevent any child from going to get help. You can go get help. This bill doesn't say a child can't go get help. That's not what the bill says. The bill says what I said at the beginning. A parent has a natural right, a fundamental right, to make the decisions for their child regarding health care, medical decisions.
But the question now, and brought up in session, can it unintentionally protect sexual predators who abuse children?
But not every parent is a good parent. They may be the reason a child wants to talk with a medical professional. The child may be experiencing abuse in their home or even incest. Those children are seeking protection from their parents or some other person. It has to be confidential. They need to be able to talk with medical providers in confidence.
The law went into effect on July 1st. Democratic Senator Melissa Wintrow was one of 7 who voted against the bill. She says it's something she's willing to go back and fix if there are unintended consequences.
I think now that it's a law, we see people panicking, and I think the biggest concern is that health care for young adults is going to be in jeopardy and compromised. We need to put egos aside, our opinions, what we think, politically, and really look and center what is happening for our youth and how do we improve their lives and make sure this law is not having a detrimental effect, whether intended or not.
Even though Governor Brad Little signed the bill, he stated concerns about access to behavioral health and conflicting sections of code. Little said, quote, "I urge all stakeholders to closely monitor any negative consequences this litigation has on our youth accessing the behavioral health supports they need. In the event this bill creates any unintended barriers for adolescent behavioral health care, I expect amendments will be made to address the issue accordingly," end quote. After reaching out to Little as to whether or not there have been issues, we've yet to hear back. Senator Kelly Anthon was the one who sponsored the bill. He said, quote, "When I heard Senate Bill 1329 could have the unintended consequences of affecting investigations of serious crimes against children, I contacted the Idaho State Police. I spoke directly with Colonel Williams. He was unaware of any issues but promised to get me in contact with another department of his to make sure. Obviously, if that is an unintended consequence of the bill, we will make changes accordingly. We spoke to the Idaho State Police. In the case where a minor needs a sexual assault or rape kit test, it's out of their hands."
The actual physical evidence collection and the medical treatment is going to happen locally. It's going to happen in these communities around Idaho.
Local law enforcement and hospitals are the ones having to follow the law because they administer the kits. ISP just handles the lab results. When we reached out to the hospitals, St. Luke's didn't have a clear answer given the newness of the law, and St. Alphonsus didn't have anyone to comment on the issue. As for local law enforcement, Boise Police says, quote, "Investigators have tools and procedures in place to address a variety of circumstances over the course of investigations involving victims of all ages. The Boise Police Department will continue to serve victims in our community in accordance with state law." BPD didn't say if there was an issue, but Meridian Police thinks there is, saying, quote, "Law enforcement is very concerned this law will allow children to continue to be victimized with no recourse. We know at times kids are abused by family members and, yes, parents, so we know this creates a huge obstacle when trying to stop some of our child sex predators." Now, it is important to note that if you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted and is in crisis, to call the number on your screen. It is National Sexual Assault Hotline. Let me give it to you, 800-656-4673. You know, the big question here is if this is going to be an issue for minors, right? And after going through a traumatic situation, you know, we're kind of dealing with trying to figure out the answer. Nobody really knows what's going on.
And there seems to be a lot of ambiguity, kind of like with the new abortion laws, where the doctors, well, we don't know how to handle it yet. We haven't seen the cases yet, or we're just not knowing about it.
Yeah, and that was one of my big questions, right, for police officers or hospitals. Like, are you guys, is there this fine line where, you know, you guys can step in and kind of change that? But there's no clear answer yet.
Senator Anthon mentioned there is a discussion, or there's language in there that protects against parents that are the abusers or whatever. But that has to do with documents and medical records. Like, you cannot refuse records to a parent with this new law, where before a 14-year-old and above had to sign off and say, yes, my parents can look at my medical records. This changes that. But it says if that parent is under an investigation, then that can be refused. But if without the rape kit or without anybody saying there's an accusation, there's no investigation.
Exactly.
So, okay, there's a lot of gray area there. All right. Thank you very much, Hunter.